What God showed me is my dad was an employee. I was an entrepreneur. He was an employee. So it wasn't that he thought I was lazy. That's the mindset that he had as an employee. And so fast forward, I start getting into different entrepreneurial ventures. And this was before I started walking with Jesus in 2003.
This is Henry Washington, and you're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below. Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni, and today's guest is Garr Russell. Garr, super excited to have you on the show with me today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day on a Saturday to speak with me here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here. A Saturday at 6:30. I'm like, this guy's a dedicated podcaster. I definitely want to chat with him.
6:30 for you, 12:30 for me, because
there you go.
we got that 6-hour time difference with you on the East Coast and me very far away, about 5,000 miles away in Hawaii. But yeah, so super excited, especially with what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I'd like to start things off the same way I start every podcast episode. And we'd like to know more about you. So if you could, Garr, share a little bit about yourself, tell us your story, and just tell us, who is Garr Russell?
Yeah. So Garr Russell I always like to say it's in this order. First of all, I'm a disciple. I'm a follower of Jesus. Second of all, I'm a husband. Third of all, I'm a father. And then next, I'm an entrepreneur. And then all the things that fall under that: real estate investor, coach, all those things. And that's me in a nutshell. I was a full-time RVer for about 5 years. We just got into a house. It's been just a little over a year now. Just got back into a house. We're actually getting ready to hit the road here May 24th. And my 7-year-old, so with us full-time RVing for 5 years, and she's 7, she literally spent most of her life in an RV. So we had to make one of those, when you were a kid and like Christmas time was coming, you like made those little hoops that you hung on every day. When it got closer, you would rip a hoop off.
Yeah.
And then there was Chris. We had to make one of those yesterday because she's so excited to get back in the RV that she needed some way to measure the time to when that was going to happen.
Oh, that's awesome, Garr. It's funny because something that my wife and I have talked about for a while is maybe taking 6 months or a year and RVing across the United States and then doing it again also in Europe. It's something that we've been talking about for a while. And then potentially ending that trip with getting on a sailboat and then sailing around for a while. Those are some ideas that we've been playing around with. In the future, we'll see. Because right now, my daughters are teenagers, and I'm not sure if that's something they'd really be interested in doing right now, and I don't want to force something on them. But we've been homeschooling them their whole lives, so it would be easy to pack up and do it, but we're actually getting ready to put them in school this year for the first time. So a couple different things happening. It's pretty exciting, but yeah, I am very interested in this topic because it's something that I've looked into for a long time. And you in particular, with what you do here with the RV rentals, is unique to what I've talked to other people about with renting RVs. So definitely excited to get into this. So with that being said, let's get into this, Garr. And can you tell me a little bit about what you do right now with Fireside?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, a couple of those things you said. After we got done RVing, I told my wife, next we need to sail around the world. And
there you go.
On our honeymoon, I got sick on a catamaran. And then we were on a whale watching tour a couple of years ago, and I got sick too. She's like, yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen. But we did just go on our first cruise, and I didn't get sick. So I don't know. We might get to do the cruise thing still.
Okay. Cruise is a big ship and everything, but I did 20 years in the Navy. I love being on the water. So it's hard for me to escape that.
Yeah. And we homeschool our kids too. We have ever since they were born.
Nice.
And I have a teenage daughter, and she is dreading this upcoming RV trip because she's finally set down roots here in Florida. So I totally am connecting with everything you're saying there.
Yeah. No, how long's the trip for?
It's not that long. We're leaving May 24th. We'll be back June 15th.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to leave Florida, head up to Michigan, and we're going to visit about 5 of our franchises on the way there and back. So it'll be a fun trip. She's a teenage girl, and so her world is her friends right now, which is perfectly normal. All you parents out there, I've done the research. They totally deny you in their teenage years, and their friends are the world to them, and you don't know anything and they know everything. That's normal. Okay. Every parent needs to know that right now.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. I definitely appreciate that perspective. Interesting. So you said you are going to take this trip. You're going to visit 5 of your different franchisors. So tell me about your franchise.
Yeah. So basically what we do, I call it Will Estate. We're a management company, but we do it with RVs. So just the same as you would hire a property management company to take your home or apartment complex, or even now your car through Turo and stuff like that. Just like you would pay somebody to take an asset of yours and manage it on your behalf. That's what we do exactly with RVs. So people give us possession of their RVs. We rent them out on their behalf. They get a paycheck.
Yeah, that's a pretty nice passive model for somebody interested in doing that. How would somebody get started in something like this?
I got started in this in what one of my mentors, Russell Bronson, calls my epiphany story. I bought my wife a camper for a 10-year wedding anniversary. And I thought I was like crushed it, like brand new camper. I brought it to Grand Haven, Michigan. That's where we lived at the time. Set it up at the beach. I just thought this is going to be great. You know how it is in our heads, right? As guys, like we nailed it. Husband of the year. I got it all figured out.
Oh, yeah.
She was 7 months pregnant with our Isabella. She shows up to the campground. And it's funny because I think actually in my book, I say the story wrong. My wife just corrected me on this recently. So I don't know if I violate like any laws out there, because my book says one thing and my wife tells me another. But day 2, my wife says, "Hey, I'm going home." And I thought I forgot something. No, she was going home and not coming back. Like she was miserable. She wasn't enjoying it. And instantly I thought, man, husband failure. Now, it wasn't what I thought it was. So that pain, right? A lot of invention comes out of pain. I instantly got on Craigslist and I listed my RV for rent. And within a couple hours, I started having these inquiries come in. And literally within that day, I had my first booking. And so my entrepreneurial brain clicked on and I started renting it out, and it was one thing to the next. And now we have, I think, 40 franchises around the country with hundreds of RVs under management. It's quite an amazing how businesses start. You know, I'm sure a lot of you business owners out there have similar stories. You didn't think you'd all of a sudden own a pet grooming business, but you didn't like the people that were grooming your pet, and now here you are.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that business up in particular, because my wife had a pet grooming business, 2 different ones. One in New York and one in Charlottesville, Virginia. So I think that's pretty interesting. That's the one that you choose. No, awesome. Okay. So it started off as Bob Ross would say, like a happy little accident.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
love Bob
we're gonna
Ross.
turn
Yeah.
this little mistake into a happy little tree right here.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, right? So you took something that was potentially adverse and turned it into what it is now, a very successful franchise business. And so I'm curious as to how the growth of this went. Like, what kind of model did you follow to go from doing it on your own, right, and renting out your particular camper and then RVs in the future, to what it is now, where you said, hey, what if I had other people lend me their RVs and we rent them out and manage it for them and create a passive income stream for them and turn this into a franchise? So can you lead me to how you got to that point?
Yeah, honestly, that was completely God. I don't get any of the credit for that. Literally what I did once I started renting my RV. So here we are 2 months later, and Isabella's born, and all of our kids were born via C-section. So it's like very scheduled and structured, right? It's like you go and you check in and this and that, and you're back in the room 40 minutes later. So I literally am getting my wife set back in the room. Her and Isabella are all set. I'm like, all right, love, I'll be right back. I was headed to the dealership to buy 4 more RVs. Because to me, I thought, that's the next thing, right? I'm an entrepreneur. And immediately God spoke to me and said, no, it's other people's assets. And looking back now from 2016 and now, man, that was genius, because During COVID, a lot of my competitors that had huge fleets, this inventory where they had the payments and the insurance and all this overhead, went out of business. And on the flip side of that, we've been able to help so many families that they purchase an RV, almost like a timeshare, especially during COVID. This happened a lot. It was an emotional purchase. And especially during COVID again, you could buy an RV for zero down, no payment for 3 years, finance it out to 25 years like a house. It was just crazy. And so we've been able to help a lot of families because now we can take this liability asset. So now we can show them, hey, let's help you pay down the principal so you can eventually exit it. Let's show you how to write this off and depreciate it and write off your interest and your insurance and all these things. So yeah, it was interesting how it was just one thing to the next, and coaching from the voice of God.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Like, it makes me think of, this is like the combination of Airbnb meets Turo, right? All together. Because when you have an RV, that's what it is, right? It's basically a property on wheels. So it's a vehicle, and then it's a property that people can go out and take a trip in and go camping. But you can also move from place to place. And that's one of the things that makes it very unique, right? Because an Airbnb is a fixed structure in a fixed area, and it's not going anywhere. Turo is just a vehicle that you're using to get from point A to point B. But when you have an RV and you rent it, and you can go anywhere you want, right? You can take this experience and go anywhere and make it into a multitude of different experiences. So that's one of the things that I find really fascinating about this. And then you talk about using other people's assets, right? Instead of buying your own. And that, I think that right there is huge, because like you said, during COVID, a lot of folks that had these huge fleets, if they weren't able to get them rented out and they weren't getting this return, they were eating all that cost and going out of business, where you were using other people's assets. And it's interesting because in the real estate world, we always talk about OPM, right? Other people's money. And you're doing essentially the same thing with RVs, right? Other people's RVs. And I find that really fascinating. And with what you've built here too, not only did you build something for yourself, but you franchised it, right? And turned it into an opportunity for multiple people to do the same thing. So it's not even like it was something that you're like, I'm going to hold on to this and keep this tight, close hold. You created an opportunity for other people as well. So I think that's really awesome. So I just want to commend you for that, right? Because you're creating entrepreneurial opportunities for other people that may not have had that or couldn't come up with something that they wanted to do. I know there's something that you talked about on the topics that you sent me about you having to overcome adversity. And so I want to ask you about that. So what is it that you had to overcome to get to this point?
Yeah, man, in my book, my real estate story, I talk about the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey before I even knew the word entrepreneur. And it was all the way back to 5th grade. And it's so amazing how we can picture these things in our past, what painful moments, usually, unfortunately, that just stick out to us, that sometimes define who we are for a long period of life. And that's what happened to me in 5th grade. I actually went to my dad with a business proposal. I was going to start a lawn care business. So I needed several $100s to buy several mowers. And then I was going to have my guys go out and push the mowers, and I was going to go set up accounts. And my dad looks down at me, and I can picture it perfectly. We're sitting in my grandma's house. He's laying on the couch. I'm sitting there on the floor, just wide-eyed, and just, I knew, man, my dad is going to be so proud of me. It's going to be amazing. I just can't wait to make him proud. And already counting the money up in the back of my mind that all my buddies are going to be making me while they work for me. And my dad looks down at me and he tells me I'm lazy. And man, it crushed me. And I didn't realize this until literally years and years later. What God showed me is my dad was an employee. I was an entrepreneur. He was an employee. So it wasn't that he thought I was lazy. That's the mindset that he had as an employee. And so fast forward, I start getting into different entrepreneurial ventures. This was before I started walking with Jesus in 2003. I was a very successful drug dealer. I had a couple of drug homes that I ran. I was entrepreneurial all through my life.
Yeah, in a very different way.
In a very different way, yeah. And then once I started walking with God and doing business his way, that's when I actually got that healing, and God started showing me these things. And I was writing my thing. He was showing me, like, he literally brought me back to that situation and showed me the lie that I was believing. And he showed me that this is what you are. And I'm a firm believer now that literally born an entrepreneur or you're not. And there's a scripture that says the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. And that's what I believe that scripture is talking about is we're born with certain gifts and abilities and bents and stuff. And as we uncover those and discover those, then we can walk into fully in what our purpose is. And so fast forward, I'm working at a business actually where I got saved in 2000. The time clock there, gave my life to the Lord. About a year later, I got fired from that job. I literally was a laborer at that job, got saved, ended up becoming a manager, managing over 20 guys. And one of my bosses didn't like that I was sharing my faith. So I got fired for sharing my faith. And that was really God, though, in hindsight. He used that to just push me into my entrepreneurial journey. And I started a credit counseling company. And here we go again, paying into purpose. I had fixed my credit from all my life of bad decisions. So during the winter, I would get laid off. So I went to the library. I learned about credit and finances and how to settle debts and negotiate and all this stuff. Then I went and bought my first home. So once I got fired from my job, I actually started a credit counseling company in 2008. I didn't realize what was happening in the housing market in 2008. I was new to that. So I got my credit counseling company and my buddy let me set up in his real estate office. And I opened the phone book. That's what we did in 2008. And I start calling mortgage companies. And the number you're calling is disconnected. The number you're calling, man, there's a lot of bad information in this phone book. And then I realized, the economy just is crashing right now. And so we ended up actually losing everything, filing bankruptcy, moving into a bedroom at my sister's house. But I knew that business could help a lot of people. And so I continued on, and we had that business for over a decade. And we sold it just a couple of years ago, and it's still open and operating today. And then full-time with Fireside.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And what a story, right? Because you took the struggles that you had of being an employee and being laid off and used that as a way to start being an entrepreneur, like really being an entrepreneur, going back to your calling as a child when you wanted to start that lawn care business. I think a lot of those deep feelings came back when you said, okay, I kind of can't rely on other people. And I think that's really awesome. And as you shared your story, it makes me think about that. You really did have to overcome a lot of adversity, and you did that through faith. So I think that's a great testament to you and what you've done through that. Now, after you started that credit counseling company, and actually I think it's interesting too that looking at 2008, that time frame, so I actually bought my first property in 2007, and that was an experience in itself come the next couple of years later. But anyway, yeah, so after the credit counseling company, as you built upon that, what was the next step after that?
Like I think all entrepreneurs typically do is we gravitate towards real estate.
Sure.
I just feel like that's just a natural move. So I started to build a real estate portfolio and, systematize and automate and document my credit counseling company. And then just, I kept putting a little more energy into the RV rental business and RV rental business. And then it just, there came this tipping point of where that's where my passion was, my energy was. And so we sold our credit counseling company. And two, I want to point out because a lot of times we can sit and talk about all these successes, right? And all these achievements. But man, I sure had potholes along the way. Just during COVID, I got super, super passive. I started drinking a lot. I was very unengaged in my business. I ended up selling probably 75% of my real estate portfolio to keep afloat. I didn't realize like the damage I was doing to my business and this and that. And I always like to share that because as entrepreneurs, as people in general, it's always fun to share the success and look at where I'm at now, but it's a little humbling to share the junk. It was a good friend from my previous church that invests a lot of money with that I still owe almost $250,000 that I was just messaging with him yesterday. And the guy was pretty upset with me. And that's something I'm working through. And that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. It's the ups and downs, the back and forth. And Man, I thank God that he brought me through it. It could have been a lot worse, especially during COVID. There was businesses that went completely under, marriages, suicides, just mental illnesses that went through the roof. And I like to share that because I want to encourage others out there that if you're alive, that your story is not over. Your story is still being written. There is still hope. Take that next step. You got to forget yesterday and move forward to tomorrow. And that's all you can do. One of my sayings I love to say is you're either winning or learning. There's no such things
I
as
like that.
losing.
I like that. Yeah. A lot of times my big thing is I always say to fail forward, take that as a learning opportunity. So like you said, if you're not winning, you're learning. I think that's huge because a lot of people will make mistakes in their business and they'll call it failure, right? What they're not realizing in the moment are the lessons that they're learning, right? And that's something that you don't really understand in the moment, right? It's something that you, in the future, you look back and say, when this happened, this taught me this. And I think a lot of people don't look at it from that perspective. They're just in that moment, they're like, I'm failing. This isn't going to work. My business is going under. But they're not taking a step back and saying, okay, this is why this is happening. And then you come to that realization later on. But if you can have that learning attitude and learning mentality in that moment, it could probably turn things around a lot faster than going through the hardship that you go through and then, sometimes taking years to recover, right? If you
Yeah.
can understand that and learn from the current situation in that moment, you'll bounce back a lot faster. And I think that's something that as you share your story that I'm getting off your reflection is that you were learning in those moments instantly. It wasn't like, okay, I messed this up and now I'm done and I'll come back to it later on. No, you took that corrective action immediately. And that's how you were able to keep this going, especially throughout a pandemic where there was a lot of issues happening. You understood that you had this complacency that you were getting yourself into, right? You got complacent and just, let it do its thing. But when that complacency started to harm your business and harm you, you took corrective action because you learned that this is not the way to go. If I'm off my rocker here with that, let me know. But that's the assessment that I got with what you're sharing here.
Yeah, once I got the realization, and it was a scary one, I actually got COVID, and this was just about a year ago this month. I got COVID, and man, I was having these dreams. I was having suicidal thoughts. And I actually reached
Oh,
out to
wow.
my buddy in the mental health care field, and I told him, I'm like, hey, this is what I'm going through. And he said, what? You're the third person today to tell me those symptoms from COVID. And that just really shook me. Like, man, because we've seen, right, different rounds of COVID have different effects. And that shook me. I was having these nightmares. I woke up one night and I handed my gun in our gun case to my wife. And I said, you need to change the code and hide this because I don't trust myself right now. And then when that moment hit, and then that's when I reached out to my accountant. I started digging into just really, I fired my right hand like an idiot. I fired her through text, was completely emotional, like drained mentally, fired her, started digging into my books, and I realized, and man, God is so good because you're never too far gone. If you have breath in your lungs, there is still hope. And one of the things I talk about we do a webinar presentation for our franchise opportunity. And one of the statistics I share in there from the SBA is that 50% of first-time businesses fail. And a lot of people know that statistic. Like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. The second statistic I share, not a lot of people know this, 80% of business owners that failed the first time, they don't try again. That failure put a seed of fear inside of them so deep that they don't try again. They go back to being somebody's employee when they're not meant to be. And that's really been part of my mission and purpose is to encourage specifically Christian entrepreneurs, because I reference the word of God a lot and stuff like that, is to wake up out of your COVID coma, get back into community. Like you said, have a mentor, get back in, plugged into system. That's one of the things I love about the franchise world is I just did a video on this the other day was franchise versus college. And sorry if I offend anybody here when I say this, but so you can spend $50,000 to go get a college degree on running a business. taught by a professor who's probably never even owned a business. Or you can spend $50,000 to buy a franchise that's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. Literally every year I have to show them my books, my 200-page franchise disclosure document. If a franchise fails, I have to report that to the Federal Trade Commission. When you graduate college, your professor doesn't call you 6 months later to see how your business is going, or a year later to see what kind of mentoring they can offer you. You know, that's the beauty of franchising in America, is you're literally cutting a paycheck for a proven system. I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. I know a couple of franchisees. I actually have several friends and acquaintances that have franchises, and I've seen some people really crush it. I have a buddy of mine that joined a franchise a year and a half ago, and in his first year, he's still in the Navy, but in his first year, I think I'm going to get out when my contract is up, because he's absolutely crushing it with the franchise. And part of that is the fact that when he joined this particular franchise, he had really great mentors that stuck with him the entire time. And anytime he had an issue or a question, he can always go back to them. And I think having mentors or coaches in your life is super important. And it goes back to what you were saying too, with just mental health, when you were talking about that symptom from COVID that you had. I took a break from the podcast as a mental health break. I told everybody, like, hey, I need to take a break for health reasons. The health reason was mental health. I needed to just take a step back and step away from this for a little bit, because I had been doing this for 3.5 years straight and I haven't stopped. So I was like, okay, I need to just take a step back, collect myself, and then come back into it. So when you talk about that, it's very important to me as well. And I think that's a message that a lot of entrepreneurs need to hear, because a lot of people will get themselves into these situations where they may be failing. And instead of learning, they just keep it as a failure. And they're just like, I don't, like you said, 80% of people that fail a business don't come back. Right. And if it's in your blood to be an entrepreneur, if it's who you are, and then you go back and you don't try again, you really do a huge disservice to yourself and even your mental health, right? Because you put yourself in a situation where you're miserable. So Garr, I really appreciate you talking about it in that aspect, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people listening right now that can really identify with that may have started something and it didn't work out. So I've failed at businesses before a couple times, and now I have a couple that in particular that do really well, that I enjoy doing. And it's amazing. Like this podcast, I love doing this podcast. Even though I had to take a break for a little bit, I absolutely love having these kind of conversations with people, getting their unique perspectives, talking about their unique business takes and how they invest and the struggles that they've had to go through. And being able to share that with my audience, I think, is just super important, right? Because having these unique perspectives can help you really reflect on your own, right? And take a step back and say, okay, if other people are doing it this way, maybe I should look at it from this perspective. Now, I really appreciate that. There was something else that you had in your topics that I think is really fitting to where this conversation is going, because you talked about the painful moments of your past, right? With being let down when you were a child, with wanting to do the landscaping business. But one of the things you put on there is moving from being a wantrepreneur to an entrepreneur, right? I think a lot of people get stuck in that bubble where they want to do something, but they just don't take action to do it. So can you describe that a little bit for me, what it means when you move from being a wantrepreneur to an entrepreneur?
Yeah, definitely. So when I say the term wantrepreneur, it's people that they're entrepreneurs, they just don't know it 100% yet. And so I talk about that in my book in regards to before the entrepreneur, you're a wantrepreneur. And then I talk about several signals that indicate you're an entrepreneur. And that's if you're always seeing problems around you. And not only that, but you have an idea to solve the problem. Or if you're driving down the road and you're always sharing with your wife or your husband, man, this product would be so much better if they did this. Or there's not a product for that. Or if that company that, does this, if they added that service, that would be another moneymaker for them. And they already have the equipment in the set, so if your brain thinks like that, I just want to confirm with you once and for all. Okay. You don't need inner healing like I needed from 5th grade. I'm telling you right now, I'm your counselor. You're an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur. That is how God has wired your brain. Okay. So you can check that box off. You're an entrepreneur. Now you just got to start to investigate, okay, what industry do I want to be in? What am I passionate about? Do I want to have a service? Do I want to have a product? And just start to explore that. And as you do that, as you take those steps, one step leads to the next, and the things reveal themselves. Just like my credit counseling company, I didn't wake up and say, hey, I want to start a credit counseling company. Just like my RV rental company, the only thing I wanted to do as an entrepreneur that I already had set in my heart was I own real estate. So maybe that's another good indicator.
A lot of us do.
Entrepreneur. If you want to own real estate, you're an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to be a landlord, you're an entrepreneur. So then it just comes down to finding what you're going to do. And again, that's what I love about the franchise world, or just purchasing into something. So many people, they decide, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. Now I want to start a business. And you feel like, yeah, but I don't know sales and marketing and this and that and all the things. Man, there is businesses across the country right now for sale. There is a generation of people that are looking to retire, and their kids are just looking for the paycheck for when the business sells. They don't want to run a business. And there are franchise opportunities around the country that are just amazing. So if you find a model and then you find yourself a mentor and then you do the work, you're pretty much guaranteed success.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. It's simple steps like that. I feel like people think that they kind of overcomplicate things, right? And it scares them away. And okay, so I just want to ask you, Garr, because you've brought this up a couple of times, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what's the name of your book and what's it about?
So yeah, the name of my book is My Real Estate Story, and it's all about my entrepreneurial journey. So it's my real estate story, and then I think the subtitle is From Lawnmowers to RVs, My Successes, Failures, and Fun Times, I think is what it is.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just all about my journey that's made me who I am today as an entrepreneur. And then it's just got all the stuff in there about the Wantrepreneur, and just encouraging entrepreneurs to continue in their journey. And then it's also helping people that aren't sure if they're an entrepreneur understand that they might be, and how to realize that. And then it just
Awesome.
Really, I like to share my struggles and my failures, because first of all, think about it like this. When you're watching a video on YouTube, or you're at church and hearing a sermon, or you're watching a movie, and somebody is sharing they're sharing their junk, right? Like, how connected do you feel to that person, especially if it's something you've been through? When somebody's sharing their junk, and how connected do you feel to that person? I mean, it just connects your heart right to theirs. And that's what we need to understand as leaders, is we don't have to look like we have it all together. Otherwise, the troops aren't going to follow us. The troops are actually going to follow us into battle if they see that we're a human like them. Hey, that we're just as scared to step into this battle as they are, but we've got a couple of tools and strategies that we're going to implement. So I touch on all that kind of stuff that I just don't feel like you hear in a lot of books. You get to see the end. You get to see the Facebook version of the entrepreneurial journey. You don't get to see what happened. It's cool. As I was feeling like I was just about losing everything just over a year ago, I started studying all these entrepreneurs and these very successful people like P.T. Barnum and Ford and Albert Einstein. And I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and I read 3 Feet from Gold. Yeah, and I started learning about all these people who literally were worth millions of dollars. And guess what? At one point, they literally all lost it all. That is part of the hero's journey, as they call it in movies. You get up to a certain level of success. That's what happened to me. Fireside was at a certain level. I had X amount of real estate, making X amount of dollars, got completely passive. So I wasn't working on my business anymore. Things were slipping away and I didn't realize it. It all came crashing down. And now here I am a little over a year later, where at that time we had maybe around 10 franchises. Now here we are a little over a year later, and we have about 40 franchises. And that's the hero's journey. So if you've been up and you've made some mistakes and then you're down, dude, now is your time, because your next step is you're going to blow up. You're going to take all those failures, all those insecurities, all the things that you learned, and you're going to crush it. That's just the process.
Yeah, no, I love it. And the process is important, right? And it's important to understand the process so that you don't get caught up in the low end of it and think that's it. Because like you said, a lot of those entrepreneurs that you talked about, they hit rock bottom before they were able to start climbing back up and climbing that ladder of success. So I think that's huge. And I love talking story and with allegories and metaphors and just different ways to describe success. And there's so many different ways to do that. But when you talk about like the reality of it, when somebody started off in a successful way and then they come crashing down, how you recover matters, right? And you show a great example of that with where you were at 10 franchises and then started to hit like a struggling point to now a year later, you're at 40. Absolutely amazing. And then those 40 franchisees, right? You're helping change their life too, which is amazing, right? Because it's a business opportunity for them. So that's one of the things I really like about that entire model, like the franchise model. It's just a great way to create like a support network for new business owners or even other business. Like I know several business owners that have other businesses that decide to get into a franchise because they want to take that mentality that they have already and bring it into a franchise. And now that's another mentor that's getting added to that team. So you get a lot of different perspectives and a lot of experience from all these different people that join your franchise. And I think that's an amazing thing. And your book, sharing your story, similar to how you did on this podcast today too, is inspiring for people to realize that you can be down and out and in a tough situation and recover from that. You can. And it takes a lot. And whatever way you find to do that, you did it through faith, right? And a lot of people will resonate with that. A lot of people can get behind that. So I think it's important to share this message and get your story out there. So, Garr, this has been absolutely fantastic. I do want to transition this into something that I call the final round. It's where I'm
Okay.
going to ask you the same 4 questions I ask everybody that comes on the show, and it'll give the audience a good idea of how you are being asked tough questions. Well, not tough questions, but like being put in a situation and seeing how you respond to certain things. So if you're ready to go, we'll get this part of the show started.
Yeah, this sounds exciting. I don't know if I've done this
This is
before.
exciting, but
Let's go. Yeah.
it's really not that bad. The questions aren't that hard. So the first question is, and this is the one that usually gets people going, is what's the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to your finance or business life?
So probably the biggest mistake I've ever made is being passive. I got to that certain point and I thought I had reached success and I stopped working on my business. And the reason why is because I had a monetary goal, right? It was a monetary goal. Now with my business, my goal has shifted. My model always used to be start, scale, sell, on flip houses and all that kind of stuff. But now my goal is to bring massive value to people's lives. So now that's my goal. That's a goal I can work on until the day I die. My goal, it's to serve Christian entrepreneurs. That's my goal. Those are the people that we call into the Fireside community. Um, and it's funny because I have friends that are entrepreneurs that are wealthy and much more successful than me. And I ask them what their end goal is. They have no clue because they're just continuing to add and one more million and this and that. There's no purpose behind what they're doing. It's all about building. And why do we do it? At the end of the day, it's a pride thing, right? It's our family isn't impressed with it. Our kids aren't impressed that instead of having 2 million in the bank, we have 10 million in the bank and they barely see us. It's to impress other entrepreneurs. It's to impress other. And so that's something that God really had to crush in me. And part of the way he did that is by convicting me that I need to share all my struggles. I need to get myself off the pedestal of all my success and share my struggles and be real and raw and help lift others up instead of looking down and showing others how great I'm doing.
Wow. Garr, I absolutely love that answer to that question because I have found myself in that situation where it's okay, I'm chasing success and chasing success. And what is the end goal? What am I doing this for? And sometimes you lose sight of why you're doing this. So keeping that goal in mind and why you do these things is important so that you humble yourself and you attack your goal in a manner that you don't forget why you're doing what you're doing. So I absolutely love that answer. This all ties into the next question. which is, Garr, what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started out on this journey?
The thing that I've really learned is models and mentors. That's one thing as an entrepreneur. We think we got it all figured out a lot of times. And when you get people that come to you with their coaching program, you're like, oh yeah, you're just trying to get $1,997 from me. I'm on to you. No,
It has to end with a 7, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah, and with a
painful.
7, yeah. And that's one thing I've learned over the last several years, man. I've literally put tens of thousands of dollars into coaching, communities, mastermind. I paid 25 grand to be in the lowest tier of one of these mentoring programs. And that was part of what skyrocketed us. Was that. And then the other big thing I would say is I like to give credit where credit is. I learned this from Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels. I learned that a business always has two major pieces. It has the attractive character, the person that's out front, right? We're doing the podcast, we're shooting the videos, we're on the live webinars, we're doing the marketing and the sales. And then you have the operator, or what some people call the integrator. And so when I got an operator, when I was at Funnel Hacking Live 2 years ago, and I learned this in September, that was my first goal, was to get an operator. So I literally went out, I sold 20% of my business. Actually, I sold a smaller percent, but I ended up giving her more. Once I learned how much money I was actually losing, I felt horrible. So I gave her more equity because I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize what I brought you into. Here's more equity. And man, those two things, models and mentors, have been a key. And
Yeah, no, that's super important, is understanding what your role should be in the business. I see this a lot too, where a lot of people, you want to be the good idea person, but you also want to be the CEO. And a lot of times you can't be both. You could be the visionary that has the direction we should go, but then you need to have somebody that's really focused on the operation of the business. And I think that's excellent that you bring that point up, because I've heard this several times with many other entrepreneurs that run into this problem when they try to do both, be the visionary and the operator. Even for me in my own business, I have somebody that runs the operations in the background. A lot of things that I do, I'm just the face of, right? And I'm running around with the good idea fairy on my shoulder. And sometimes the good ideas aren't that good. And then I get humbled when my operators tell me, hey, no, that's not how we should do things.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing that point up.
And I think it's important to point out too, is as you're stepping into that, where you're delegating roles and handing those out, I don't know who I heard it from, but if you can find somebody to do it 80% as good as you, delegate it. No one's ever going to do it exactly the way you are. Yep, your approach is perfect and you have the best way to do it. You find somebody who does it 80% as good as you are, hand them the task.
Yeah, I love it. I was thinking about this actually earlier today with the conversation I was having with my wife, just about how sometimes it's hard to delegate certain things because I always do things my way perfectly. Nobody does it better than me. And sometimes you have to humble yourself and be like, your way might not be the best way. There might be somebody that does it, like you said, 80% of the way that you would like it, but that other 20% with their flavor on it is actually better for your business. Right. No, yeah. Again, I really like that. I think entrepreneurs really do need to humble themselves. And like you said, you took yourself off the pedestal, right? I think that's huge. Okay. And actually, this is great for this next question, Garr. And that is, do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to somebody that is just getting started out today?
Yeah, definitely. I've talked many times about models and mentors, so that is definitely huge. And then outside of that, it's literally the number one thing I would say you need to do is you need to take massive action. You need to just take massive action. The more actions you're taking, the faster you're going to realize what's working, the faster you're going to realize what's not working. And when you do something that doesn't work, sit there for a minute and say, okay, why didn't this work? Learn from that, and then take more action. We get in this analysis paralysis and, all these things where we're trying to figure out, okay, why did that go wrong? It went wrong because you hadn't learned that yet, but now you know it. So take some more action, some more right stuff will happen, some more wrong stuff will happen, figure out why, and then take more action.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's something that I talk about, especially when I'm a guest on other podcasts, about what I call the 4 pillars to being able to accomplish anything, or to be good at anything. And a lot of times I talk about it to be good at finances. And it has to do with number one, educating yourself. Number two, finding a good mentor or coach. Number three, networking with like-minded people and surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And then the fourth one is the most important one, because if you don't do this, the other three don't matter. And that fourth one is take action. And like you said, take massive action. Don't just go out and get started. Go out there and start like you are ready to finish. I think that's super important. So I really appreciate that perspective, Garr.
Yeah. And one more thing on that too is
Sure.
You've got to invest in yourself. You have to invest in, so you got to read the books, you got to join the groups. Let me see if I can, one second here. Here's some of the events and masterminds and stuff I've been doing the last year. Okay. I'm
looking around here because I actually have, I don't know what I thought I had them hanging up in here. I have a stack of lanyards too for all the different conferences.
Yeah, you have to invest in yourself.
Yeah,
I just got back from an event, the U.S. Christian Chamber of Commerce. In 2 weeks, I'm heading to Myron Golden in Florida, the Make More Offers Challenge, which is another really good thing in regards to taking massive action that Myron Golden teaches. It's make more offers. Just create offers. And that's one thing that he learned is, hey, you can create an offer, $297. Here's this offer for this. Then guess what? You need to take that client to the next level. So now you create $1,000 offer. And the next, Myron has $1 million offer and people pay him $1 million. That's crazy to me. Russell Bronson has $1 million offer to be in his, forget the name of his group. I'm in his $25,000 group. He has $1 million group. But guess what happens in that $1 million group? They're coming up with $10 million ideas.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You do need to invest yourself. I'm also in a mastermind too. I think it's important, and it's something that I put money into because it's something that is making me a better entrepreneur, right? And also being able to share my tips and tricks with fellow people in that mastermind and being able to trade these ideas is invaluable, right? So a lot of people look at that like, oh, you spend how much on doing these masterminds and going to these conferences? Realistically, the return on that investment is tenfold or better, right? So I think that is a very important point. So Garr, this last question of the final round is just an opinion-based question, but it is, do you have, and this is, I'm going to preface this with besides your own, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both?
Favorite business related book, podcast. So as we were talking earlier, it made me think of this one book. Actually, I have it right here. This book here has been phenomenal. I've referenced this so many times. 3 Feet from Gold. It's based off a bunch of notes by Napoleon Hill, and it is a phenomenal book. And if you look around my office, I have hundreds of books. Like part of my day, like Elon Musk, these super high performers, guess what? 60, 70, 80% of their day is spent doing. It's reading and researching and learning. And then Tim Ferriss says, he'll literally spend 6, 8, 10, 12 months thinking on something, and then he'll launch an idea instead of just off the cuff ideas and this and that. And so 3 Feet from Gold's a phenomenal book. And then I always got to give a shout out to the book of Proverbs from the Bible, because that's just so full of wisdom and just natural little sayings that you can apply to all areas of life.
All right, right on. Appreciate that. Okay, Garr, that is it for the final round. See, like I said, it wasn't too bad. But I do have another question for you. And this question here is the most important question I think I'm going to ask you throughout this entire interview, because the people that are listening to this show right now are especially the ones that are really resonating with what you're saying, are like, I want to learn more about Garr, about his franchise, and maybe get connected with him. And so with that being said, this question is, where can people find more information about you? Do you have a website you could share with us? Any social media profiles we could follow? Anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. You can go to myrealestatestory.com and download a free copy of my book. Or if you want to learn about our franchise opportunity, you can go to Fireside RV Rental franchise.com and learn some more there as well.
All right, fantastic. Hey, I'll make sure we have those links in the show notes. So for those of you that are listening right now, be sure to copy and paste or click away The only thing I ask is if you're listening to this on your commute, please do not do it while you're driving. All right. But Garr, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today to talk with me, share your story, and help inspire others. I think my audience is going to get a lot of value out of this conversation that we had today. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, man, for picking the mic back up and doing what you're doing to inspire entrepreneurs. And it needs to happen.
Yeah, I truly appreciate that, Garr. Hey, I also want to thank all my listeners, and I want to thank you all so much for joining me and our special guest, Garr Russell, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. I would really appreciate it if you can go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about today's specific episode with Garr. Aloha from Hawaii, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.